In the quiet whisper of the whispering woods, where the tall pines leaned like old friends sharing secrets, lived a girl named Lila. She was 12, with hair like tangled rivers after a storm, brown and wild, falling past her shoulders in waves that caught the light like forgotten dreams. Her eyes were deep pools of hazel, holding stories she hadn't yet learned to tell. Lila's home was a crooked cottage on the edge of the village, where the roof sagged under too many winters and the chimney puffed smoke that smelled of pine needles and regret. Her father, Tom, was a woodcutter with hands rough as bark and a laugh that could chase shadows away. But lately, his laugh had faded, stolen by the cough that rattled in his chest like dry leaves in the wind. One rainy afternoon, when the sky hung low and gray like a heavy blanket, Lila wandered into the woods alone. School was out, but her feet pulled her here, away from the empty kitchen where her mother's chair sat cold and dusty. Mama had left 2 summers ago, chasing a job in the city lights, promising to send for them soon. But the letters stopped coming, and the promises turned to echoes. Lila kicked at puddles, her boots splashing mud up her legs until she heard it, a whimper soft as a broken bird's wing. Tucked under a fallen log, shivering in the damp, was a puppy. He was small, no bigger than her 2 fists, with fur the color of autumn leaves, matted and wet. His eyes, big and brown, looked up at her with a plea that twisted her heart. A collie mix, maybe, with ears that flopped like sad sails. No collar, no sign of home, just alone like her. She didn't think twice. Lila scooped him up, his tiny body warm against her chest despite the chill. "You're coming with me," she whispered, as if he could understand. She named him Rusty that night, for the way his fur caught the firelight like old iron. Tom chuckled when he saw them, his cough pausing for a moment. "Another stray for our pack, eh?" He ruffled her hair, and for the first time in months, the cottage felt full again. Rusty slept at the foot of her bed, his snores a lullaby that drowned out the rain tapping the window like impatient fingers. Days blurred into weeks, and Rusty grew like a weed in spring. His legs stretched long and gangly, his tail a constant blur of joy. Lila taught him tricks by the creek: sit, stay, roll over, and he learned them all with eager eyes, as if repaying her for the bowl of scraps she shared from her plate. They explored the woods together, chasing squirrels up oaks and splashing through streams that giggled over smooth stones. Rusty would bound ahead, nose to the ground, unearthing treasures. A shiny pebble, a feather from a raven's wing, a mushroom as white as moonlight. Lila would laugh, her voice ringing through the trees, and for those moments, the ache of Mama's absence softened, like frost melting under the sun. But winters came harsh in the whispering woods, and Tom's cough grew into a storm that wouldn't quit. He spent more days in bed, his face pale as birch bark, while Lila chopped wood with an axe too big for her hands. The village doctor came once, shaking his head, murmuring about lungs worn thin from years of sawdust and cold air. "Rest, Tom, and pray the spring brings miracles." But miracles were scarce, and one evening, as snow fell like silent tears outside, Tom called Lila to his side. Rusty curled at his feet, whining softly. Tom's hand, trembling, found hers. "Lila, my wild one," he rasped, "the woods, they're yours now, and Rusty's. Promise me you'll be brave. Like the river that carves the mountain." She nodded, tears hot on her cheeks, but words stuck in her throat like thorns. That night he slipped away, quiet as a breath, leaving the cottage emptier than before. The funeral was a blur of black coats and murmuring neighbors, casseroles piled on the table like offerings to a god who hadn't listened. Lila stood by the grave, Rusty pressing against her leg, his warmth the only anchor in the spinning world. The village tried to help. Old Mrs. Harrow offered to take her in, but Lila shook her head fierce. "Rusty and me, we stay." She was old enough, they said, 13 now, with a small inheritance from Tom's tools and a pension from the mill. But money didn't fill the silence. Nights were the worst, when the wind howled like a wolf at the door, and Lila lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams, wondering if Mama would ever come back. Rusty would nudge her hand with his wet nose, his eyes saying, "I'm here. We're enough." Spring tiptoed in on green shoots and birdsong, but Lila's heart stayed locked in winter. She sold some of Tom's axes to buy seed, planting potatoes and carrots in the garden patch, her hands black with soil. Rusty helped, digging holes too deep, unearthing worms he chased in circles until he flopped down, tongue lolling, grinning that doggy grin that made her smile despite herself. They had adventures still, hikes to the old willow by the lake, where Lila skipped stones and Rusty swam after them, emerging like a drowned otter, shaking water everywhere. But shadows lingered. Letters from the city, none. Whispers in the village. Poor girl, all alone. Lila ignored them, pouring her days into Rusty, brushing his coat until it gleamed like gold, whispering secrets to him under the stars. "What if we're broken forever?" she'd say, and he'd lick her face as if to say, "Not us. Never us." Summer burned hot, the air thick with the hum of bees and the scent of wild roses. Lila found work at the mill, sorting logs, her arms aching but her belly full. Rusty waited at the gate each evening, tail thumping the earth like a drum. One twilight, as they walked the forest path, a letter fluttered from her pocket, not from Mama, but from the city orphanage, saying they had news. Lila's heart leaped, then sank. She tore it open under the oak tree, Rusty watching with tilted head. Mama was gone, not left gone. A car accident on rainy roads, quick and cruel. The words blurred on the page, but the truth cut deep. Lila crumpled to the ground, sobs shaking her like an earthquake. Rusty climbed into her lap, heavy now as a grown dog, his muzzle on her shoulder, warm breath steady against her neck. He didn't whine or pull away. He just stayed, a furry shield against the world's sharp edges. Grief wrapped around her like vines, choking the joy from simple things. Days dragged, meals tasted like ash, and the woods, once a playground, felt like a cage. Lila stopped exploring, holing up in the cottage with books from the library, tales of lost girls finding magic in hidden glens. Rusty sensed it, pacing the floor, pawing at the door until she relented. "Fine, boy, just a short walk." But short walks stretched long, pulling her deeper into the trees, where the air hummed with life she couldn't touch. One evening, thunder grumbled on the horizon, and Lila tied Rusty outside while she mended a shirt by candlelight. "Stay close," she murmured, scratching his ears. But the storm hit fast, rain lashing the windows like angry fists, wind howling Tom's name. Lightning cracked and a branch snapped from the roof, crashing down. Lila bolted outside, heart pounding. "Rusty!" The yard was chaos, puddles swelling to ponds, leaves whipping like flags in a gale. His rope lay frayed, snapped by the wind. Panic clawed her throat. "Rusty! Where are you?" She grabbed her rain jacket, slick and yellow, and plunged into the woods, flashlight beam slicing the dark like a knife. Rain soaked her in seconds, hair plastering to her face, boots sinking in mud that sucked like quicksand. Thunder boomed, shaking the ground, and she called his name until her voice cracked. Memories flooded her, Rusty as a pup, tumbling after butterflies, Rusty guarding her sleep after Tom's burial, Rusty licking salt from her cheeks when Mama's letter came. "I can't lose you too. You're all I have left." Hours blurred in the storm's roar. Branches clawed her arms, drawing thin lines of blood. She slipped on mossy rocks, knees bruising black. "Rusty, please." Lightning lit the path ahead, a muddy clearing by the creek swollen and raging. There, huddled under the willow, was a shape, fur matted, eyes glowing in the flash. Rusty. He lifted his head, barking once, weak but alive. Lila ran, slipping the last yards, collapsing beside him. Mud caked them both, rain mixing with tears on her face. She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his wet fur, the scent of earth and dog filling her lungs. Oh, Rusty, I thought you were gone." He leaned into her, tail thumping faintly, his body trembling but warm, alive. They stayed like that, two hearts beating in the downpour, the world washing clean around them. Dawn crept in slow, the storm sighing to a drizzle. Lila untangled herself, legs numb, and coaxed Rusty home, his limp favoring one paw from a twisted thorn. The cottage door creaked open to sunlight peeking through clouds, steam rising from the wet earth like grateful breath. She bandaged his paw by the fire, feeding him bits of bread soaked in broth. As he slept, chest rising steady, Lila sat back, watching the flames dance. The grief hadn't vanished, it never would, a scar on her soul. But in that muddy hug under the willow, something shifted. Rusty wasn't just a dog, he was her anchor, her wild heart mirrored in fur and paws. And she was his, the girl who saved him from the log, who shared her world when it crumbled. Word spread in the village, of course. Mrs. Harrow brought stew, eyes soft. "You're stronger than you know, child." Lila nodded, a small smile breaking through. She wrote no more letters to ghosts. Instead, she planted more seeds, watched them sprout green and stubborn. Summers turned to falls, and Rusty healed, his limp fading to a quirky hop that made her laugh. They roamed again, deeper into the woods, finding new paths, a hidden meadow of fireflies, a cave echoing with bat whispers. Lila turned 14, her hair longer, her eyes brighter, carrying Tom's axe like a talisman. One crisp morning, as frost kissed the leaves, a stranger knocked, a woman tall and tired with Mama's hazel eyes. "Lila, I'm Aunt Nora, your mama. She left this for you." A package, wrapped in faded cloth. Letters, yellowed and unsent, spilling love and apologies. "I was coming back, always." Lila read them by the window, rusty at her feet, tears falling but not alone. Nora stayed, helping with the garden, her stories filling the empty chair. The cottage warmed, laughter returning like birds to spring. Years wove on, threads of joy and ache intertwined. Lila grew into a young woman, apprenticed at the mill, her hands calloused but sure. Rusty aged graceful, his muzzle graying like hoarfrost, but his eyes still sparkled with mischief. They sat often by the creek, her arm around his shoulders, watching the water rush past, carrying worries downstream. The whispering woods whispered still, secrets of loss, of love that endures rain and mud. And in every storm, Lila remembered that night, the hug that bound them tighter than ropes or promises. For in the end, family wasn't blood or letters. It was the warm weight against your side, the eyes that said "I'm here," even when words failed. Rusty passed on a golden autumn day, chasing one last squirrel into the trees, his heart giving out under the oaks. Lila buried him by the willow, paws toward the creek he loved. She cried then, deep and raw, but the pain was softer, laced with gratitude. The woods held her, pines standing sentinel, and she felt him still in the wind's rustle, the puddles splash. Aunt Nora held her hand, the village sang quiet songs. Lila planted a sapling over his grave, roots to tangle with his bones. Now at 18, Lila walks those paths with a sketchbook, drawing the light through leaves, the curve of a paw print in mud. She tells stories to the village children, of a girl and her dog who braved the storm. And sometimes, in the rain's patter, she hears a bark, faint and joyful. The world turns, seasons cycle, but that bond. It echoes eternal, a heartbeat in the woods' endless song.